Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, June the 18th, 2026. I'm Eric Feaster, Professional Development Coordinator for Maryland Departments of Health Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to today's webinar. Before we get started, let's walk through some housekeeping details. If you'd like to use closed captioning so you can read what's being said, please click the CC button. The transcription is not exact, but it's pretty close. Today's presentation is available in the handout section. Click the paper clip in the upper right-hand corner to download the presentation. Right now, all attendees are in listen-only mode and your mics and cameras are turned off, but you'll be able to comment or ask questions at the end of the presentation. You also can submit questions during the presentation for us to read and answer during our Q&A section. If you would like to ask a question aloud during our comment section, please click the hand icon in the left corner. To raise your hand, we will invite you to unmute during our public comment section. And now I'd like to hand it over to Rhonda Workman, our Director of Federal Programs. Good afternoon, Rhonda.
Good afternoon, and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Howard County Health Department and our new location for our meeting today. We got a thumbs up from Laura, so that's great. We're really excited. What a great day. A little bit cloudy outside, but you know, the weather's been pretty nice. A little bit up and down, but good overall for me. I'm Rhonda Workman. I'm the DDA Director of Federal Programs. We're excited to meet with you today. We've got a lot of great information that we're going to share, including introducing some new members. So I want to first turn it over to my co-chair, Charlotte, so that she can share an introduction of herself and also share a welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlotte Frigno Whitaker. I am a participant of the Community Pathways Waiver and have been self-directing since 2017. And I'm very excited to continue discussions with everyone today.
Thank you, Charlotte. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you, Eric. So here's our agenda today. We're going to first start with reviewing our council purpose, our role, and our ground rules, as we have new members, and we just want to make sure that we're all in line with that, following that. Charlotte will take a call for approval of the April meeting minutes. Nicole will be sharing introductions of our new membership today. We'll provide a update on the Community Pathways Medicaid Waiver Amendment. And then we are going to have a guest speaker from, or guest speakers from our Medicaid office within the department. They're going to share information and updates related to the Maryland Provider Registration and Information Management Enterprise, also referred to as M-Prime. And that's the new system that the provider enrollment is transitioning to. So currently we use something called ePrep. We'll be transitioning to M-Prime along with all other Medicaid providers. And then we received a request from the council member to share some additional information about how we coordinate and collaborate with the Behavioral Health Administration and the Maryland State Department of Education. So we'll touch base on that. And then we'll open it up for our subcommittee reports. And then finally, we will open it up for public comments. I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and he's going to just remind us about our meeting conduct.
Okay. The open exchange of diverse perspectives is an important value of our group. We ask that everyone engage in a respectful and constructive way, treating one another with dignity and good faith. To help maintain a positive and productive environment, we ask participants to avoid disruptive behavior, inappropriate language, or personal attacks. If needed, facilitators may step in to address the concerns and support a respectful meeting space for all.
Thank you, Eric. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we're going to review the council purpose, role, and our ground rules. I'm going to first turn it over to Charlotte. So if we can go to the next slide. Charlotte is going to review the council purpose.
The purpose of this council is to advise and provide recommendations to DDA on system design, service delivery, and quality enhancement strategies for the DDA operated Medicaid waiver program, and to foster meaningful engagement and establish a feedback loop with all stakeholders while prioritizing input from individuals with lived experience with a Medicaid waiver program. This is in reference to House Bill 1244. Rhonda?
Thank you, Charlotte. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this slide outlines our role as a council related to the input and advice. So as it's noted here on our screen, the council shall provide advice and make recommendations on the DDA operated Medicaid waiver program system design, service delivery and access to services, federal waiver assurances, ensuring access to the Medicaid services, also known as the access rule, quality enhancement efforts and improvement strategies, communication with stakeholders, and collaborative processes with stakeholders. Next slide, please. And these are our ground rules as a council. So just want to review those and encourage everyone to refer back to them during the meeting if needed. First, we must all assume positive intent. We're all here to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and Marylanders across our state. So we want to make sure we're all assuming positive intent. We want to speak one at a time. So we might have some discussions where multiple people would like to talk. Council members, if you just raise your hand in person, we'll call on you, and then also members on the virtual will also call on you. As best, let's try to use plain language and not use acronyms. Let's explain terms and what we're talking about. And if anybody needs additional information, please speak up or put your hand up so that we can make sure that we are all on the same page and knowing what we're talking about. We want to share information openly. We want to listen to different points of view. So important to stay flexible and open-minded. Participate actively. We need to engage respectfully and politely, and try to minimize distractions with our phones and emails and things like that that may be coming. So we're really grateful for you joining us today and having you present during the meeting. Next slide, please. Charlotte, turn it back over to you.
Okay. So the minutes from the April Waiver Advisory Council meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes?
I have a question. This is Stephanie Watkins. I didn't see any mention of the lived experience group. I also feel like the minutes are honestly like just copy and pasted. The agenda is just copied and pasted. And I'm wondering if we could maybe talk about having a different format for the agenda, especially maybe having action items. So last month or last meeting in April, there were lots of questions brought up and lots of comments we'll get back to you on that. We asked for data on several things. There was information asked about the annual amount, the annual limit amount, and then I think the comment back was you would check back with Medicaid partners and get back to us. So there's a lot of like kind of unanswered questions. And so I was thinking as part of the meeting minutes, it would be really nice to have action items of here's what DDA is going to do. And then also, what do you want of these subcommittees? What should we be working on until our next meeting? So, you know, we'd really like in your subcommittee meetings every week to be looking at these issues, or I there's this constant conversation about like feeling like we're all kind of wasting our time doing this, and there's not real engagement, and I feel like our minutes are representative of that. And I think that if we had a better understanding of what you want from us and what we want from you guys, I think it could be reflected in the meeting minutes. So that's my comment. I'm not going to approve them because I feel like they're missing quite a lot of information that was in last month's meeting.
Thank you, Stephanie. And we had Andy.
One correction, my name does not have an E at the end. It's also on my name tag. I crossed it off on my,
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
We'll make sure we
It's
get
a
that.
common error. I just thought for the record it to be correct. And then, this is a little different from Stephanie's comment, but I want, if we don't amend these to add detail, maybe we could have a discussion about, some of the discussion items that we had during our last meeting, and previous meetings. They don't all make the discussion doesn't all get into the minutes. So just adding a recommendation to add more detail to future of the meeting minutes, because I think that the main ideas are here, but then that'll save time rehashing things each week and forgetting we talked about things. So that's just a comment more than anything else.
Yeah, I would just echo what Stephanie said. I didn't attend last meeting, and the minutes don't include very much detail at all for me to understand what was discussed or decided or brought forward by the recommendation group. So happy to take a minute if you need help with that. But I do think that you can see a lot more than what's being attested. This is essentially that. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I heard suggestions to include more details. We have a correction in Andy's name. Andy also suggested including some more information about the discussion points for the next meeting minutes. So where does that leave us with the minutes?
We vote to amend, do you want to make a motion to amend to add some detail?
Yeah, can I do that?
Sure you can.
Yeah, can I make a motion to amend the April minutes to add additional detail?
I'll second that.
So for discussion, are we ready for discussion? Could we add that we talked about annual hours? Talking about day-to-day administrator, I believe, that was part of the discussion. And if CMS came back and said no to there'd be a follow-up discussion regarding other options, such as 9 months, whatever. And then it said, Rhonda said she would let us know when they hear back from CMS about annual allocations. There was a question on if there was a limitation, if it was a limitation of LPS. So maybe Stephanie could add more detail to this. And then nursing documents, we were talking about that policy that was held. Someone asked for DDA to include those with lived experience in the additional feedback, and also for DDA to share the feedback received in list of contributors. Is there anything else?
Sorry, you were cutting out a little bit. I couldn't hear you, Andy, but I think that was everything. And then we also asked about finding more information. What data is there any tracking of previous changes made? An example of that was as individuals are losing their day-to-day admin hours, we tracking impact of that, and how are we tracking that?
So Andy, can I ask, what are you reading from?
This was an email that from our subcommittee.
Okay.
Where a member was re-listening to the April meeting because trying to be a good, because, do their due diligence, make sure these minutes were accurate, and noticing that this detail, which was pretty significant for our conversation, would have been helpful to be included. So I was thinking we would add it going forward, but I think Beth is asking for these minutes to be amended with those points.
Any other discussion? Yes.
I have a suggestion actually. So, since we're recording it, why don't we have the AI take minutes and we can just review that and correct that. That will make sure that all the points are there and we as human beings can correct those. So that way we will ensure that we cover all the points.
Any discussion on that? So I think, unless there's somebody who raised their hand, the recommendation was to amend the minutes to include additional details. That was second. All those in favor of that recommendation going to the DDA?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
So if you could raise your hand if you're in agreement that we can collect it, if we're going to have that level of detail. We'll get you all can put your hands. Okay, go ahead, you. Unless you want to make it a little bit more. Okay, just give us a minute as we record that from our membership. Cheryl.
Someone share when you're online where I find how do we raise our hands? Sorry, I'm not used to doing it virtually.
So again, if you're attending online, if you can just make sure that you raise your hand in agreement with this. For our guests that are joining us today, only council members can vote. So just a reminder of that. So if you're not a member, you do not need to raise your hand. You're good, and we had everybody, but. Eric, can you share and remind us again on how to raise your hand?
Sure, there should be a small icon of a hand at the bottom left hand of your screen. And you just click on that. Right now, a bunch of people are raising their hands.
So if you're looking at the screen right now, what's on the screen is we look at it here in the room. On the bottom left-hand corner, there is a white box with a red circle with 2 lines in it that says it's being recorded. Right next to it is the hand function. Okay. So I believe the recommendation is move forward from that. So great. Okay. We're going to go to the next slide.
One question, sorry, before we move on from minutes. So we made a recommendation, a motion rather, to amend the April minutes. But moving forward with this meeting and additional meetings, will those other recommendations, will they carry through into those? Like we won't have to ask for amendments or changes to the meeting minutes every time, right?
It's a good question. So let's make sure that we address that. Are you saying you would like to make another recommendation that all minutes going forward would include more details? Or
Yes,
how would you
please.
like
I would like to make a motion that the minutes capture the discussions in a way that reflect what is discussed at the meetings to someone who maybe didn't attend, or just provides enough detail that somebody reading it can get an understanding of the discussion that occurred within the meeting.
A second. Can I amend it?
Go ahead.
I'm gonna amend it. Yeah. I forget Robert's rules.
Yeah.
Could we also include any action items that
Yes.
either the subcommittees are taking on, the DDA would like feedback from subcommittees, or the DDA is gonna come back to this committee with next time?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that's part of that detail.
Yes.
So that's more clarification than an amendment.
Yeah, you don't need to.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Nicole to reread what she has, just so that we make sure we have it.
Okay, so Rob asked to do an amendment to reflect what is discussed and have enough detail within the minutes moving forward. Andy asked for an amendment regarding any action items the subcommittee or DDA has to fulfill for the next meeting to be included in the minutes.
And Andy, did you say any items that DDA wanted the subgroups to look at?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we had a motion, it was amended. So any other discussion?
Do I need a second for the amendment?
Well, I figured we could. Sure, I was just gonna see if there was any additional.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor, again, if you could raise your hand online, and so we got everybody here is a yes. Members online, remember, if you're a council member, you can vote. If you could put your hand up using the hand function, that would be great. Bless you. All right, thank you. So both of those recommendations have passed and they will go to the DDA leadership as official recommendations from the council. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to share some updates about membership.
Good afternoon, everybody. If we could go to the next slide, please. Today, we wanted to officially welcome 6 new council members who have been appointed by the secretary. We now have representation from 2 individuals with lived experiences, both in the self-direction model, that's Tivon and Keelan. And then we also have 2 family members, one from representing traditional model and self-direction model, and that's Jeannie and Paulette. And then we also now have a support worker, that is Richard, and then a new coordinator of community services who is Nanalangela. So we wanted to welcome each of you to your first official Waiver Advisory Council meeting.
Thank you.
Welcome. And if you have any questions, any support that we can provide you, please let us know. And just a reminder, with the emails that we send out related to communications, upcoming meetings, draft minutes, et cetera, we also include information about a prep call that's open to all members. It happens the week before the meeting. It's on a Thursday at noon. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we wanted to give an update on the Community Pathways waiver amendment. Can you go to the next slide? As shared here, we have received comments from 846 individuals. That includes participants who use services, family members, providers, advocacy groups. And with that information, we are working to identify the key themes and recommendations. And as we have more information available, we will be sharing that information. Any questions? Yes.
Do you have a timeline for when you'll be sharing that?
I do not, but as soon as we can, we will definitely be sharing that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So it's really a great honor that we have our Medicaid provider services teams within the department joining us today. They're going to share information related to the new Maryland Provider Registration and Information Management Enterprise, also referred to as MPRIME. Eric, can you go to the next slide, please? So we have Charlie Crisp, who is the Director of the Office of Medicaid Provider Services within the Maryland Department of Health. So he's online in addition to several members of his team. And so we're going to now turn it over to them to share information.
Thanks, Rhonda. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Rhonda mentioned, my name is Charlie Crisp. I'm the Director of the Office of Medicaid Provider Services. Also on the line this afternoon is Lucas Rodriguez. He is my Acting Assistant Director who oversees Medicaid Provider Policy, Compliance, and Communications. Thank you for having us. We're happy to share some updated information regarding the transition from our current provider enrollment system called ePrep to our new Maryland provider enrollment system that we refer to as MPRIME. Next slide, please. So just wanted to go over a few agenda items that we're going to present on today. Lucas and I are going to tag team the presentation as it is rather lengthy. So this presentation will cover an overview of the new MPRIME system. We also wanted to provide an update on a contract that we awarded to our partner. We refer to them as AHS, or Automated Health Systems. We also wanted to share some updated guidance regarding provider enrollment backdates, the emergency enrollment exemptions as we head into the transition period this summer, updates for providers who may find themselves in the suspended status. We also wanted to share new information about upcoming provider trainings on the new MPRIME system, and then some additional new information. Next slide, please. So this may be some repeat information for folks, but ePrep is our current provider enrollment system. We've been using that system for about 9 years. The new MPrime system is developed in-house by Maryland State staff in partnership with our Maryland benefits partners, and it is scheduled to go live in October of 2026. In the new MPrime system, providers will continue to use the system similar to how they use ePrep. So they'll use it to submit new enrollment applications. They'll use it to submit updates against their existing enrollment accounts. They'll use the new MPrime system to submit revalidation applications and also manage any of their changes of ownership. Next slide, please. Some of the features of the new MPrime system that we'd like to highlight. So MPrime is a self-service portal. There are portal-based actions, so providers control all of their own access and all of their own information. It's very user-friendly. There's also enhanced account level reporting. So if providers outsource their enrollment activities through a third-party credentialer, and that credentialer is responsible for enrolling multiple locations or multiple providers, the users have the ability to run reports at the account level. And we have designed the new MPrime registration and sign-up process so that it is full self-service. So there's much simpler administrator access. Folks can gain access to various provider accounts just by answering a few security questions right within the portal. Next slide, please. So we shared transmittals earlier this year in January and in February, notifying providers of the upcoming transition later this fall. And ahead of that transition, there is going to be a series of application holds that are going to go into effect. The first application hold is quick approaching. It goes into effect on July 1st for our moderate and high risk providers. Just wanted to call out that DDA providers are classified as moderate risk. And this hold will remain in effect until MPrime goes live in October. During the application hold periods, providers will be unable to enroll any new providers or submit application updates. Next slide, please. We did want to call out a few things that we are putting in place to accommodate any urgent needs during the application hold period. So we know that providers are responsible for maintaining 3 addresses with the Medicaid program. The first is a practice address. So what we are allowing is providers may submit an update to request that we update their practice address now before the hold. If providers wish to do that, they can provide the anticipated effective date of that address change once that application is submitted. And the Medicaid program will do our best to process that application close to that effective date and apply that requested effective date of that practice address change. The second address type that providers are responsible for maintaining is a correspondence address. We're asking providers to hold on submitting any correspondence address changes until after MPrime goes live. As all correspondence throughout the next few months while the holds are in place will be delivered through Gov Delivery, which is an electronic means of communication. So no need to update correspondence addresses, as we will not be sending out any paper mail through USPS. And then the third address that providers are responsible for maintaining is a pay-to address. So we know that oftentimes providers may experience payment issues that are a result of a pay-to address being updated. So if providers do need to update their pay-to address during the application hold time, we ask that you contact the Medicaid program directly at the website, at the email account listed there on the slide. That's mdh.mprimegolive@maryland.gov. And the team is very responsive, and they'll be able to provide additional information and handhold you through that process. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to share that on May the 6th, the department was successful at the Board of Public Works in awarding our business services contract to our current provider enrollment call center operator, AHS, or Automated Health Systems. Under this new contract, AHS will continue to support Maryland Medicaid providers with various tasks, including enrollment, validation, and enrollment update activities. They also will continue to operate our provider enrollment call center and the outreach and education teams. So this is the same services that AHS currently provides to our Medicaid providers under the EPREP system. Also want to call out that the provider enrollment call center number will remain the same. It will not change. And most of the provider service representatives that answer calls in the call center will just transition to the new contract as well. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Lucas.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the updates that I'm about to give are a lot of the new updates that we just shared with providers. This is actually one of the first groups that will be hearing these updates from Maryland Medicaid. We sent out a transmittal this morning that'll slowly be making its way to providers over the next couple of days here. So all of this information is written in that transmittal. And there's a link to it, I believe, at the end of this presentation that has additional detail. But we just wanted to kind of make sure providers are understanding a couple of the key changes, particularly as they relate to the application hold. So the first thing that I'm going to talk through is our application hold exemption process. So as Charlie said, providers are going to be unable to submit applications as we transition the system from July 1st until the EPREP system, or the, MPRIME system goes live in October. However, we do understand that there may be emergency situations in which a provider must enroll during that, that hold period. And so to that end, Maryland Medicaid has an emergency limited use process that will allow provider applications to be submitted during the application hold. This is only going to be used in situations for which failure to enroll that provider would impact the health, safety, and well-being of Maryland residents. And what that really means is we're going to be reviewing these on a case-by-case basis and determining if not enrolling that provider is going to have an impact on Maryland Medicaid participants. And if it does, then we will be working to make sure that that provider is able to enroll. And if not, we'll talk about later in the presentation what that provider will have to do to enroll in October when MPRIME goes live. If we go to the next slide, please. We do want to make sure that it's clear to providers that they are responsible for doing the necessary steps to either newly enroll, revalidate, lift their suspensions, or do any of the other necessary updates before the July 1st application hold goes into effect. If a provider fails to, for example, lift their suspension or complete a revalidation, we're not considering that to be an emergency exemption process, and they would be having to submit those updates after the hold. And we do just want to be very clear on that so that providers understand kind of what the expectations are going in. And of course, there will be that opportunity to address those facts and submit those updates after the application hold is over. But we do really want to ensure that providers understand their responsibility to get in all of the necessary paperwork and updates into EPREP before the July 1st application hold goes into effect. Next slide, please. So providers who believe that they have a reason for an emergency application exemption should email mdh.mprimegolive@maryland.gov, which is our delegated inbox, and they should use the subject line request for emergency enrollment hold exemption. This will let our staff know exactly what you're looking for and be sure that it's triaged to the appropriate members who are reviewing those emails so that a determination can be made. Providers who are requesting those exemptions should include their provider NPI, their provider type, the specific service address that they're looking to have enrolled, and then the circumstances that are warranting the emergency enrollment. We do request that you be as detailed as possible when providing those circumstances and include all of the information that you think would be necessary for us to render those determinations. That is, again, so that we can ensure that we're evaluating with all of the context and information necessary to evaluate that request. Next slide, please. Providers who are approved for an exemption will be emailed with additional steps on how to submit an application during the hold period. Keep in mind that this will probably be a very manual and paper-based process. So there's still going to be a lot of additional information we'll have to collect from the provider. And of course, the application will still have to be reviewed on its own merits, but you'll get additional information on how to submit that information. If you're denied for that exemption request, you'll be informed that you must wait until MPRIME goes live in October to apply. And again, that doesn't mean that you won't be able to enroll with Maryland Medicaid. It does just mean that you'll have to wait until the MPRIME system goes live before we're able to accept your application. Next slide, please. We can go one more. So these next couple of slides here are regarding our provider enrollment backdates. So again, as we've discussed, there will be that application hold period, and we've gotten a lot of questions about what happens when providers want to enroll during that period, but they're of course unable to do so because they're unable to submit an application enrollment. And we are happy to announce that new providers who submit an application in MPrime before December 31st of 2026 will be considered for a provider backdate of their application. What this essentially means is that if you're attempting to enroll during the application hold, but you're unable to because we're under an application hold, but you get your application into us between the October go live of MPrime and the end of the year, we will consider a potential backdate on your application. Those backdates would be approved if they are approved to the later of either that the start of your respective application hold, which in this group would be July 1st because DDA providers are moderate risk providers, or your provider license date. So of course, we won't be issuing an enrollment date that is before your license date. So if you got licensed in September, we wouldn't be going all the way back to July 1st or August 1st for that group. Next slide, please. Providers who are enrolled and are granted a backdate would be able to submit claims for services rendered to Medicaid participants during that period. Those claims would still be subject to the standard 12-month timely filing requirements based on the dates of service, regardless of the date that you were enrolled. So you would want to submit all of those claims timely after you were able to enroll. Providers who are seeking to enroll and get a backdate should not be submitting claims prior to their enrollment application being approved. What this means is if you're submitting that application in October and attempting to get that provider backdate, please don't submit those claims until you've gotten confirmation that your enrollment has been processed and your backdate has been approved. And we have issued that approval letter. If you're billing those claims before you're enrolled with us, of course, you won't have then a Maryland Medicaid ID, and that will cause those claims to be denied because they're not to a payable provider. Next slide, please. I do just want to make clear that, of course, Maryland Medicaid would reserve the right to deny any backdate for any reason necessary. So providers that are seeking to have an enrollment backdate are providing those services to Maryland Medicaid participants at risk. If you fail to submit and complete an enrollment application, or if you're denied from participating for any reason, you're not able to then bill the services for your participants for the services that you rendered. Again, our intention here at Maryland Medicaid is to make every effort to ensure that providers who are rendering those services in good faith and then enrolling with us in a timely manner are eligible and able to receive those backdates. However, it is imperative that providers understand that it is on them to enroll with us in a timely manner and to make sure that they complete all the necessary paperwork and information with us. And so we do just want to be very clear on that with providers that it's really important that if you're looking for that backdate, if you're looking to have one of your renderers enroll with a backdate, that you're completing that paperwork in a timely manner, that you're following up with your return to provider on those applications, that you're making any necessary updates, and you're doing so in a timely manner. And just working with us to make sure that we're able to process that application for you once MPrime goes live. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides, we can go to the next one, are regarding providers who are suspended during the application hold. So any provider who is suspended before or during the application hold will be unable to submit an application to lift their suspension during the hold. Again, we're not taking any of those applications during the hold, so you would need to wait until that MPrime goes live in October to complete your update application to lift the suspension. So those suspended providers will remain suspended with Maryland Medicaid through the duration of the application hold. Next slide, please. That being said, if you are suspended either during or before the application hold, you will be able to submit that update application to lift your suspension once MPrime goes live. And then, as is current practice, once that suspension is lifted, providers will be able to retroactively bill the claims for the dates of service that you were previously suspended for. What this means is, let's consider a situation in which a provider doesn't revalidate before MPrime or before the application hold goes into effect. And let's say you are suspended from your participation starting July 1st. What that would mean is that while you wouldn't be able to bill those services between July and October during the application hold, once you get your new application to us in October, once we're able to lift that suspension and you get all of those corrections made with Maryland Medicaid, you can then go back and bill retroactively for those services in July, August, September, and the beginning of October. You would again, of course, be required to bill those within 12 months from the date of service, but you would be able to go back and be reimbursed for those services that you rendered while you were suspended. Next slide, please. The other thing that we want to talk about, so the standard process for suspended providers is that if a provider is suspended and does not submit a necessary application update to lift their suspension, after a year, we do terminate them from their program. And that is a standard and existing practice that happens automatically. And if we go to the next slide, what we're doing during the application hold is we are deferring the administrative termination of suspended providers during the application hold period. So a provider who would have been scheduled for termination due to failure to update their or to lift their suspension for a year during the application hold period will not have their termination processed, and instead we're pushing those out to November 30th of 2026. What that will essentially mean is that you will have until about 6 weeks into the M-Prime system to be able to make those updates in the new system so that your termination doesn't get processed and you're able to lift that suspension. Again, the intention here is to continue ensuring that we're allowing providers to make those updates to lift their suspensions, while also ensuring that any providers who were previously suspended for failure to revalidate or any other reason would be terminated and removed from our roles in a timely manner in accordance with our established policies. So again, if you're suspended at any point during the transition to M-Prime or were suspended going into the application hold, just keep an eye out for that October go live date. Be sure you get into M-Prime and submit your documents to us as soon as possible, and we'll be sure to process those so that we can get you back in good standing with the program. With that, if we go to the next slide, I believe, Charlie, it's back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lucas. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming provider trainings that we'll be hosting later this summer and early into the fall. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So we, Maryland Medicaid, have developed a training registration form for providers that will be posted on the new M-Prime Go Live website. We will be releasing alongside that training registration form a training schedule mid-July. Right now, there are 4 training topics, and each will be hosted multiple times over the 2-month period of August and September. Next slide, please. So the general trainings are going to be open to the general provider, public provider population that participates within Medicaid. And those training topics will include an M-Prime provider registration and a general system overview of the portal functionality. We'll also be conducting trainings on how to submit a new enrollment application, how to submit an update application, and then also navigating the revalidation process. Next slide, please. In addition to those general provider trainings, we are also going to be hosting some targeted trainings for various provider or stakeholder groups. One of those stakeholder groups that we really want to focus on are the DDA provider populations. So these specific tailored trainings will cover the application process and portal navigation that is specific to the DDA providers. These trainings will be limited only to DDA providers, and each training will have a comprehensive Q&A session to allow DDA providers to ask their specific question. And then once that new provider registration form to sign up for those trainings is released mid-July, DDA users will have a unique registration form that will be shared in addition to the general sign-up form. Next slide, please. So once those trainings are completed, we will continue to host trainings after M-Prime goes live. So those training opportunities will continue post go live based on provider need. And then at the end of those scheduled trainings through August and September, we are going to have a feedback tool that providers are going to be able to use to suggest future training topics based on their M-Prime experience, their experience in the trainings, and then if they feel there's additional information that the Medicaid program needs to provide. Next slide, please. Also wanted to share some additional information. So if we go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the top of our presentation, the Medicaid program released 2 provider transmittals earlier in the year, one in January and one in February. Those are linked there. And then the 3rd transmittal we released this morning. So that one is listed there, but it's not yet linked. I believe, Lucas, we posted that to our website and we distributed that via Gov delivery to all providers. So if folks do not see that in their inboxes, you can go out to the Medicaid provider transmittal website and it is posted there as of this morning. Next slide, please. Also wanted to provide some helpful links for folks to use. So we provided the links to the transmittals. On the M-Prime website, those transmittals are also linked there. There's also an FAQ document that is updated on a regular basis. There's also a timeline of events that includes when the application holds go into place, when the trainings will be held, and then when M-Prime goes live. And then if providers have any additional questions, we ask that you direct them to that delegated email account, the mdh.mprimegolive@maryland.gov. And I think that may be my last slide.
Thank you so much, Charlie and Lucas. We really appreciate that. We're going to open it up for discussion. And before we do, I just wanted to share some additional information specifically related to our self-directed services, unlicensed vendors. DDA will be sharing communication today that will be going out through our communication listserv. And we're going to be sharing information about that self-directed service provider transition. As you know, per our fiscal year budget law that was passed, unlicensed vendors providing services under the self-directed service model will need to become a DDA certified provider by July 1st in order to continue to provide services, with the exception of support brokers and nursing support services or nurses under that model. And so as we have been sharing, information and resources related to the DDA provider application process and the importance of completing that, the new M-Prime process will not be required until the spring of 2027. So the important thing for any current unlicensed vendor providing services under the self-directed service model is to make sure that they complete that DDA application process. So those can be reviewed to ensure they meet the qualification standards as per the federally approved application. They will not need to go through ePrep, or they will not need to go through M-Prime until a later date in the spring of 2027. So again, just information will be coming out today from DDA. It'll include some additional information and resources for people self-directing their services. To include, we had conducted a survey of DDA providers who were interested in expanding. So we've got a listing of service providers that are interested in supporting people self-directing. It's broken out by regional office, or Central Maryland regional office, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, and Southern. So there'll be information related to that. We remain available to provide support and assistance to individuals. But as we open it up for discussion, just want to remind you that Charlie and Lucas are here. They are the subject matter experts related to the new M-Prime system, sharing kind of the situation, statuses, dates, and important information and additional training coming about. And for our unlicensed vendors providing services under the self-directed service model, they will not need to go through the M-Prime process until a later date, spring of 2027. So we'll open it up for questions, discussions. Just a reminder for our guests online, I know a number of people have their hands raised. We will do public comment at the end where you can share your comments and thoughts. But during this time, we're opening it up to council members. We have Andy in the room, then we have Laura, and then Beth, and we'll look for those council members online.
I had a question about the extended timeline for the unlicensed vendors. Okay, so what I heard you say was they need to become a DDA certified provider by July 1. They just don't have to be in the M-Prime system until spring of 2027. Is that all going to be extended to all providers or just available, like, so existing unlicensed vendors, they're getting this timeline, but what about people who come into the system and they want to be an unlicensed vendor in August? Will they need to wait to go through M-Prime because they're new? They're not being grandfathered in? Or will they also be given an extension? And same with all providers. Do providers who are new that support people through the provider model, are they skipping the M-Prime process? Are they just going to be deemed approved and have until spring of 2027 to get enrolled?
So what I can share with you today, and Robert, feel free to add additional information. I would just say that what we're sharing today and the communication that will be going out is specific to unlicensed vendors currently providing services under the self-directed model. For those individuals, they need to complete the application process, and the M-Prime process they will be completing in the spring of 2027. You asked Andy about unlicensed vendors in August. As of July 1st, the only unlicensed vendors would be support brokers and nurses. So if you're not an existing vendor right now, that would not apply to you. All other individuals, providers who would like to become a DDA provider, whether it's a licensed service or certified provider, would need to go through the normal process and to include the requirements as Charlie and Lucas has shared today. Thank you for that question. I think we had Laura, then Beth. Yeah.
And 4 questions.
Okay.
So just to follow up on what Andy said, is will the certification process for the vendors be the same as for any other provider?
Yes.
Let's see. One question is, how will DDA providers get the transmittals? Because there was some discussion about that because existing DDA providers didn't seem to get some of those earlier transmittals. So and I've spoken with Perry, the Deputy Secretary Briskin. So how
Sure. So Charlie, can you share with us how?
Sure, I can. Yeah, so hi, Laura. So what we have done, historically, Medicaid releases any of our transmittals once they go through executive sign-off to the various programs, and it has always been the program's responsibility to ensure that their provider populations are receiving those communications. What we have done, Laura, since we heard that there was some providers that were not receiving those communications, is Medicaid is continuing to share those transmittals with the respective programs. But in addition to doing that, Medicaid, as we enroll providers, we maintain all of the contact information. So we are also directly distributing those transmittals to any providers that we have contact information on file for. And that includes all DDA providers as well.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, 2 more questions. So the concept of, is it an emergency, whatever the language is, for the process during the pause. I guess a concern I have is whether it will not be considered meeting that standard of, I can't remember exactly what it said, but
It said impact the health, safety, and well-being.
Safety and well-being. If there's sort of the sense of, well, providers will just provide the service without being paid. So have you all thought through that? Because we hear that from regions sometimes, like, oh, you providers, all you care about is money. And I know Robert has said nobody should say that, which I appreciate that. But we've heard it many times over years, it's sort of this disconnect. So how are you all going to think about that?
Charlie?
Sure. So Laura, that's why we have kind of that 2-pronged approach, where if it does meet the criteria for the emergency paper-based enrollment, we will be granting those. However, if it doesn't meet that criteria, providers can always wait and enroll in M-Prime. And like Lucas shared, we'll be automatically applying those backdates to those providers. So for the DDA providers, as long as they were licensed on or before July 1st, we will automatically be applying that backdate to their enrollment application and their account once it's processed. Once that application is approved, processed, and the backdate is applied, they can then submit claims for those services that were rendered during the application hold time that they were not previously enrolled under.
Right, I understood that part. I guess my concern is we already have some number of providers who are not being paid because of issues that are, happening with DDD. So I just don't want to see more circumstances where providers aren't paid because of a pause with a Medicaid process. So that's my comment. And then the last thing is slide 16, the second sentence. We were trying to figure out what it meant and we were struggling a little bit. So it says providers seeking an enrollment backdate provide services to Medicaid participants at risk. What does that mean?
So Lucas, I'll start and jump in here. So Laura, what I would say is that while providers will be able to enroll once M-Prime goes live, providers need to ensure that they meet all of the criteria for enrollment. So DDA providers have to be licensed by DDA, and that's pretty much one of the only requirements. But other provider types have additional criteria that they have to meet. So it's just basically us saying to providers, make sure that you are sure you're going to meet all of the criteria to be eligible to enroll as a Medicaid provider prior to rendering those services. Meaning, if you don't meet those and you're unable to meet those, Medicaid will be unable to enroll you as a provider. Therefore, you're operating at risk.
That's not what this says. So, sorry.
I
That's not what this
that and
comment
this
says.
I can't make work together, so I'm not sure what I'm missing, but.
The at-risk is referring to the participants in this sentence. It's the second sentence on slide 16.
Yeah.
Wait, our slide number is different?
Slide 37.
We combined the.
Oh, that's why we're confused.
So it's the one that says providing services prior to enrollment, that slide is the one that second sentence is confusing.
Slide
37.
It's earlier than the training piece. It's way in the middle of the beginning.
That's it.
Wait, go back.
The last one you wrote. That was that second
That's
sentence?
it. The second sentence.
Charlie or Lucas, are you able to speak to the second sentence there? Providers seeking enrollment backdate provide services to Medicaid participants at risk.
Do you want me to jump in, Charlie?
Go ahead, Lucas. Sorry, I'm having some internet issues. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So Laura, this is what I was explaining, that if a provider is not enrolled and they render a service to a Medicaid participant, they're doing so at risk, meaning they may not be reimbursed for those services if they don't meet the criteria for provider enrollment as that provider type.
Okay, so what if a provider is enrolled, they're licensed, existing DDA licensed provider or certified, approved, whatever, and the issue is that someone we see this not infrequently, that somebody has an emergency and they have to move from one home to another. And they're given 30 days, either they lose their lease or they need something accessible immediately. And that site, so the provider is approved or licensed, but the site has not been validated the way it normally would through EPREP. So is that at risk if you provide that service in an emergency for someone?
No, we wouldn't consider that at risk because the provider would meet the criteria for enrollment, and we would work with them in that sense. So that wouldn't be something that we would consider at risk.
Okay, I would just say.
You're saying, Laura, what you're trying to say is that the provider was registered and enrolled, the site was registered and enrolled, but they had to change locations during the application hold period, and they were unable to submit that update to us, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, they would have been able to, but they can't because of the pause.
Yep. And that's one of those things that we talked about earlier on, I think it was in the slides where we were talking about the 3 different addresses. So those are things that we would work with the providers on to ensure that we would be able to pay for the services at those locations, because we basically prevented the provider from updating that address during the application hold time.
Right. Just if you use that slide, like moving forward, you might want to tweak that because it may cause undue concern, right?
So just to chime in here and to really clarify, these are for providers who have not yet enrolled with Maryland Medicaid. So these would be providers who are looking to prospectively start rendering services to Medicaid participants while they're not enrolled with our program. And so what we're trying to get across to those providers is that we are, willing to offer those backdates for providers who are eligible, but that does not really, absolve or supersede the requirement that those providers meet all of Maryland Medicaid's participation requirements and criteria. So we're really looking to make sure that providers understand that if they're not enrolled with Medicaid yet, and they're advertising themselves as a Medicaid provider, they're not able to then go back and retroactively bill participants for services that they rendered under the pretense of being a Medicaid provider. So if the provider's already enrolled and needs to make service address updates or any of the other things that I think you're describing, they wouldn't be captured under this particular scenario. This is for providers who have not yet enrolled with Maryland Medicaid, but are rendering services as if they are.
Right. So that's helpful. I think maybe a little sentence, precursor to those points would help, just for clarity.
And so Charlie and Lucas, as you consider some additional information and training for the DDA side, I think what I'm hearing say is a suggestion that maybe you might want to clarify that and use that maybe in an frequently asked question or document to say, in this example, this does or does not apply, just so it's very clear so that people don't get confused and raise concern. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, absolutely.
My question was just not that detailed. My question was more about just how many providers, have we had a lot of vendors put in applications to become providers? And what is this? I know you probably can't give us exact numbers, but I'm just curious, have a lot of vendors made that move, or are they not making that?
Sure. No, but did you want to share information about provider services?
I'm wondering if it's just a matter of waiting until many of these vendors move over as providers. So I'm trying to just understand that. And then, Rodney, you mentioned that many traditional providers are now going to be accepting clients, participants who are in self-directed model. Where did you say that information?
Survey inquiring whether or not they would be interested or planning to expand. We had talked about that during the webinars and some of the questions that as additional resources for individuals that we were happy to kind of inquire. Just a reminder, participants self-directing are the employer record. They can hire employees. They can use unlicensed vendors, meaning support brokers and nurses only, July 1st going forward. They can hire and utilize a DDA certified provider or a DDA licensed provider based on the services, and they'll make those choices. So in addition to this listing that we pulled together based on the survey, Any of the other DDA providers that are available under the budget, the budget authority are available. So we don't want you to think that it's just those on the
Yeah.
listing. These are just additional providers that raised their hand and said, right, they were interested in additional supporting.
Okay, thank you.
And that website is up and running now. That part of our website is up and running now. So I'm meeting with the regional directors on a daily basis, getting updates. And as of this morning, there were across the state 31 applications that are in progress, and the team is pretty confident that they'll be able to decision those applications before the July 1 deadline. And by decisioning, they'll either be approved or they won't be approved. So that's important to know, and folks should make sure that they do have a contingency plan in place. This is not, for lack of a term, isn't a rubber stamp approval process. They have to meet all the same requirements that our current DBA licensed and certified providers have to meet. So it's very important that they have a contingency plan because there's no guarantee that the specific vendor they're using will actually be approved. So I just want to make sure that those out there listening understand that.
Robert, where is it on your website? I'm sorry.
It's on the partner provider page.
Under CCSM provider?
Yeah. And then it says information for providers.
So as Laura's looking at that, we're gonna check the hands that are raised. I believe we're gonna see if there's members. We have Charlotte, then Azeb, and then Karen. Charlotte, would you like to share your thoughts?
Thank you, Rhonda. Actually, after the discussions following the last presentation, the members of the Lived Experience Subcommittee would like to propose amendment to the agenda to move the updates from the Lived Experience and Recommendations Subcommittee to up on the agenda before the next DDA scheduled item.
I second that motion.
Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, great. So we'll move the subcommittee members' updates before the next agenda item, which was an agenda item from a council member. Any other discussion, questions for Charlie or Lucas? I'm sorry, we have Karen Lee and Azib, I think. Was it Azib next? And then, so we have Azib and then Karen Lee.
Is she talking?
Eric, can you unmute Azib?
Oh, sorry about that. Good afternoon. We've already talked about during the subcommittee. Rhonda was there, and we've said what we needed to be said at that meeting about the current change of only licensed DDA providers will give service. But I just wanted to show you what's happening in our community right now. I just want to share with you what we're going through. Several families are really panicking because they've been getting services from vendors, but not licensed by providers, DDA licensed providers. I'm going to give you one example that I involved myself to support this family because they are 80-year-old parents, and they have a son who is a 40-year-old. He speaks only Amharic, and their provider before was I set them up with Ethiopian provider, and that service provider is not going to be able even to apply to DDA licensing. So I couldn't help that provider, and several I sent to Rhonda this week who've been helping our community. But this family needed help. They speak English very well, very highly educated people, but somehow they sent their son back home and he doesn't speak English. So now I have called 10 DDA providers. licensed DDA providers. I got their names from DDA website. 6 of them didn't even return my call. I called a couple times, 3 times. One provider, a big provider, they said, sorry, we can't accommodate this person. And 3 of them responded, and one said, we need your support as the SNC. Can you bring people we can hire? That's nice, so that they can work and train those people and have them ready for this family. Out of 10, I'm going to be honest with you, only one provider took the names of the family and connected with them. Karen is here, so I have to say 6. It's only them who were even willing to communicate with the family to support this person. So how are we going to work with these licensed DDA providers who cannot provide service to our community?
Izzy, thank you for sharing some of those challenges and concerns. We're hoping with the new information that's being released today and is live on the DDA website, it includes lists of providers who did raise their hand and said they were interested in supporting people under the self-directed service delivery model. We're happy to connect and provide additional support and assistance to the regional office for you or the families that you're talking about. But we're really hopeful that this communication that's going out today and with that information already live on our website will be a good resource for people so that they'll have specific providers that they can call who have said they would be interested in expanding. The information includes the specific services that the provider is interested in providing and also a contact person for that so that people can talk directly to their point of contact. So thank you for sharing that and reaching out to us earlier this week with emails. I think we have Peter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So back to Azeb's conversation, I'd also like to make sure that you're accessing the CCS whose role it is to help to coordinate those services. But also to say that when families provide self-directed services, and the reason why they probably chose self-directed in the first place was because of how their services were shaped for their son or daughter, and providers might have things shaped a little bit differently. So hopefully you can bring them together so that they can have a discussion rather than just a yes we do or no we don't, so that they can discuss, because the way that the services are modeled when the families have the control of shaping them might be different than how providers are able to do that. And so that's just as an aside. I wanted to go back to the conversion from ePrep over to mPrime and get some clarification. We have not received any information about that as a DDA provider. I want to make sure that the team from Medicaid know the difference between a DDA certified provider and a DDA licensed provider, and that you're using both lists when you send out information, because certified doesn't mean that we don't have the same legal standing. It means that we don't provide services in a facility owned or operated by our organization, but we have the same standing, we have the same Medicaid collaboration, we have the same rules that we follow, everything. And so I just want to make sure that when you're saying licensed, you're meaning licensed and certified, and that when you're sending information out to providers, that you're sending it out to licensed and certified providers.
Sure. So just to provide some additional context, so we did receive the feedback that there were some challenges in receiving those first 2 communications. And so in response to those, to that feedback, what we've done for this most recent communication that went out as of around 8 a.m. this morning is we've started using the Gov Delivery platform, which essentially will allow us to send that communication out to any of the email addresses that we have on file for any of the Maryland Medicaid providers. So any of our providers who are currently enrolled with Maryland Medicaid who have an address on file in our ePrep system should have received that communication via that Gov Delivery system. So again, that did just go out this morning. We understand that the first two provider transmittals that went out, there was some concerns with regarding how they were being distributed. So we have updated that process so that it captures all enrolled providers. But again, if there are any difficulties in receiving that communication, you can always check out our MPrime webpage or our transmittal webpage to see those updates as well, as they're all posted there the day that they're communicated as well.
Thank you. We have Paulette and then Stephanie.
Good afternoon. I just have a question in regards to what services, again, talking about the DDA providers. I'm now confused about certified and licensed, but the DDA providers, as far as providing individual family goods and services, must that payment be to a certified provider?
Yeah, that's a great question. So two things I would say. As Karen Lee was sharing, DDA uses some slightly different terminology. We kind of distinguish our providers between DDA licensed and DDA certified. And a DDA licensed provider, as Karen has shared, is a provider who owns and operates a site. And the DDA license are given to day habilitation providers because they have a building or a site that they operate specifically. And our residential services, so our group home services. And then the only additional one would be career exploration facility-based where they're providing it there. All of our other services are considered certified because they're more community-based. Depending on who you talk to in our department, and Medicaid license, from some perspective means your certified license, approved, that type of thing. So, but that's how we distinguish the two of those. In terms of individual and family directed goods and services, they are not required to become a DDA provider because their services are procured through the financial management and counseling service provider, who is an organized healthcare delivery system. So if individuals are receiving individual and family directed goods and services from community entities, they can continue to do that, provided that that service is available and they meet those qualifications. That would be paid for through the financial management and counseling service providers. They do not need to complete the DDA certification process. Thank you for sharing those questions, Paulette.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have Stephanie.
I have a couple of questions. First, can you tell us the total number of applications that have been submitted that are currently being processed?
Yeah, so as of this morning, I don't have the total number that have been submitted thus far. We've really been focused on what's in the queue. And as of this morning, there are 31 in the queue. Majority of those applications are in our Southern Maryland region. And the teams, again, are very confident that they'll be able to decision those applications by the July 1 deadline.
31 across the state.
31 for across the state, that's correct.
So July 1st is the deadline for vendors and providers.
Yes, that's correct.
So my second question is, and I might not be understanding this, but in the 28th meeting, the May 28th meeting for the Rate Review Advisory Group, RRAG, it was stated that the SDS rates were outside of the purview of that group and that it was going to be brought to the Waiver Advisory Council, which we've not heard anything about. And I know that there's proposed new rates that are going through, I guess they're part of the waiver amendment. So can you explain like how, if someone in self-direction chooses to use a provider, will their rates be lowered? And are providers aware of that might be committing to folks now that like, oh, well, come September, our rates are going to be reduced. It seems to me like it's going to make it a lot less. Like, why would a provider choose to go with someone in self-direction when they can get a higher rate for someone not in self-direction. So am I wrong on that? Am I not understanding that? And then why are rates for self-direction not given the same professionalism of having a whole team of reviewers that are professionals, analysts that are deciding on these rates? How come those in self-direction aren't getting the same equitable look at those rates?
You're correct. The SDS rates are not within the scope of the rate review advisory group. Any discussion around the reasonable and customary standards for the self-directed services model should funnel through the Waiver Advisory Council for discussion. The new reasonable and customary standards that will be released on July 1 are based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics information that came out this past May for 2025. So that's the methodology currently being used for those rates. Any other discussion should come through the Waiver Advisory Council, and we can talk about what that process is to get something like that on the agenda.
And just a reminder that the emails that we send out includes a link to a form where you could add agenda items. That's been in all our communications that we've been sending for some time. So that's why the next topic agenda was actually submitted from a member. So any topic items that you would like to add and details, please utilize that process. Okay, and then we have Jean Furman.
Yeah, hi. What did you need? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hi. I didn't have anything to add.
Oh, okay. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Sorry.
Okay, we have Andy and Laura.
I had one question. It's for you all that did the presentation. I'm sorry, just forgot your name. Mr.
Charlie and Lucas.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I appreciate it. Just so I'm understanding, if there's a currently licensed provider and a person they support gets a notice from their landlord that they have to move, the landlord's selling the house they're renting, and the provider finds the person another house, or the provider finds a house, or whatever. And that site needs to be licensed for community living group home services to be delivered. Does that fall under your emergency criteria if the person is in BDA services, even if they've been fairly stable, so they're not gonna be at risk really, but without this other house, they would be homeless, I mean, would that fall under that criteria, or would the provider have to wait? What would happen? How would you treat that situation? Thank you.
Can I repeat that back to you to make sure I understand what you're saying? So you're saying providers enrolled, the participant where they reside because they receive home services in their home is being relocated, correct? So that site that they live in is licensed.
Correct.
So what you're saying is they are enrolled at one location, however, they are being moved during the application hold to a new location that is not on file with Medicaid or registered with Medicaid.
Correct.
Under that scenario, what we would say is the provider should continue to render services to that participant and submit claims as they do, and they should process as they currently are. Once M-Prime goes live, that provider should go in and submit an update application for that service address to be updated.
Okay, so can I ask a follow-up? Just so I understand.
Yeah.
So even though the person's not living in that site, they're living in a different site, the provider should continue to submit billing on that site and then move them in the system when the hold is complete.
Correct, because in the new system, you'll be able to submit that address update and you'll be able to also provide a date to make it effective, and we will make that effective retroactively.
Okay. So Charlie, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here, because you may not quite, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, because for what you just said. So it's my understanding that in the Medicaid system, our providers are enrolled, they may have a license, and then their sites are licensed.
Correct.
Like home A is licensed, home B is licensed. So in this situation, I'm a provider, I have A and B licensed sites, licensed homes, and now I just got a new home, home C, but it's not licensed yet.
Correct.
It's in this holding pattern. So I think what the question was, I heard you say that they could continue to move forward and support this individual in this licensed C home, this new home that's not currently in the system yet. And then that could get caught up. So should they bill under their current home, home B, or should they wait until C comes online and bill for C? Because it's two different sites.
So can I ask a question and follow up to that?
Sure.
This is for you, Rhonda. So question or location C, DDA would have already issued that new location a license, correct?
It would be the same process, yeah.
Yes.
As it is now.
The Novus team would have reviewed it, issued a license, and then they would submit the enrollment application through M-Prime for that new location, correct?
Correct. They would go through the normal process with OHCQ, license site, validation, et cetera. And then they would need to go through the Medicaid enrollment process from M-Prime.
So what I would say in that situation is you should probably wait until M-Prime goes live, enroll that C location, and then we can backdate it to the date of the license.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's the concern that Laura was bringing up, because providers are already carrying a lot of debt for other issues,
Right,
unpaid.
if the person, I mean, cut off, but if the person, it meets health, safety, well-being for the person, I can't support saying, well, just assume the provider will provide a quarter of 3 months of services or whatever it is without payment. Even though the reality is it meets those standards for the person. This assumption that providers are just gonna carry costs when they're already dealing with it with EBD issues, we would have a lot of concern about that.
So the recommendation is they are processed as emergencies and go through a paper.
Right, if a provider chooses to buy a group home, because they're planning for the future, that is different from somebody currently getting support has a need that falls into those categories. And under those circumstances, I would hope that the department would say, we recognize that this is, meets health, safety, well-being, and therefore we will process a paper.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, Laura, now. Yeah, and I agree. I think that we could, if in the event that situation comes up, you all should submit the request for the emergency process. We can then share the paper application, and I can talk to my team internally about that. But these things don't happen that often, correct?
Not a ton, but it happens a little more than you think. But no, there would not. It's not like you'd be inundated or anything.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely something that we could consider as one of those exceptions for that emergency process. And then, Laura, I think we're meeting with you on Tuesday morning, so I'm always happy to have additional conversation then as well too.
This will be a good run through for that.
Yeah.
Are you gonna? I know. Okay. Okay. My question was, it was just feedback since the door got open around rates for providers under self-direction, and Robert saying it falls under the Waiver Advisory Council. I just want to, since that we started that discussion, to just say, there's been a lot of feedback from existing providers who have supported people under self-direction model, that the administrative cost is greater than just filling straight into LTSS because there are multiple layers. And so having that rate go, scaling back that rate so much for providers under self-direction to be the same as providers under the provider model, I think we've heard from a number of providers that they're concerned about their ability to continue to do that.
So under the self-directed services model, the provider, the DDA licensed or certified provider will get get paid up to the same rate that they receive, when they're filling in LTSS.
That's my
So,
point.
yeah, if I can speak from experience with my organization, we've provided services to people in the self-directed model. And what we have found, and we don't charge an exorbitant amount more than what the DDA rate is. It's maybe $1, $2 or $3 more per hour. But there's so much administrative work in obtaining the payment piece, because you'll submit it and then it gets kicked back because something doesn't compute within the FMCS, or something is always missing. And so there either needs to be better systems to train providers with FMCSs on what is needed for that to completely eliminate that, or if we could build through LTSS, that would be great. Just something that allows, because when you get, we spent, gosh, the better part of a year trying to get paid from an FMCS, and you know, that work, if it's at the regular rate, the regular provider rate that we get paid through LTSS, then we just lose time and money on that. And I think that's where you're going with that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's only a training issue. I'm sure there's a piece of it that's
Sure.
that, but the other thing we've heard talking to providers in FSCS is that sometimes it's the family is delayed in approving it, or the person, and they have to approve it, and the provider is continuing to try and jump through all the hoops to just get paid. So I was saying that evening out, really, right now, maybe it'll change at a future point, but right now, it doesn't allow enough of an administrative component for providers under the self-directed model.
Thank you for that feedback. And we are still awaiting the process mapping results that the providers subgroup has undertaken. And I know one of the recommendations that came up was the ability to just bill for those services through LTSS.
So I completely love that idea, and I would like to extend it to others also, not only just the provider for the FMCS training, but also maybe case managers, if not, because families are a lot. So maybe case managers also. And we've been requested, they have requested it in the past, but you know, now that I see that the providers are facing the same issue too, I would think that it would be beneficial all around.
I just want to make sure I understand. So I think what I was hearing was a recommendation, a strategy that's been brought up in different forms about providers, DDA providers billing directly to the FMCS for the services. The CCSs don't bill the FMCSs, so I just want to understand what you were saying.
I was referring to the other component of what he was saying, Rob was saying. So the one part was billing into MTSs rather than through FMCS. The other part was the training part.
To have more training coordination for CCSs and FMCSs.
Yes, FMC, like on the FMCS processes so that it can be more transparent.
Okay.
I've had my hand raised for a while, sorry, and I feel like I'm not in the room, so it can't be heard. If you do that, how do you maintain budget authority? If someone is self-directing and a provider is saying they had staff out there 20 hours that week, then in self-direction, you have budget authority, you approve that invoice. You look at that and you say, yes, you did work these 20 hours, and no, you didn't. So if you're going to go straight to billing through LTSS, how is that then not a hybrid model between provider model and self-direction? That is not self-direction. So how do you maintain budget authority with that?
So for clarity, we did not say that we were moving to that. But when we get recommendations, we go back and we do consider them, and we look at it from all different aspects.
And just to add to what Robert is saying, remember, as per the charter, to be an official recommendation to the DDA, there needs to be a motion, it needs to have a second, it needs to be passed. So we have had a lot of great discussions in various meetings, a lot of great suggestions and proposals, but to be an official recommendation for which we go back to the DDA, the department's leadership, it would need to be passed. So as we did today, the recommendations related to the minutes. So just want to share that as we're having discussions in various groups. I know one meeting, there was a lot of presentation of ideas from the waiver recommendation work group, and those were all taken back. They didn't move forward as official. So to be an official recommendation to the DDA, it would need to be motion passed And then the DDA and the department's leadership would consider that before any action would be taken on that.
So should we make a motion up for that?
Council members can make whatever motion they'd like. I was just trying to clarify that the DDA has not said that we are moving towards with DDA providers billing directly under the self-directed model through LTSS or the provider portal.
Well, and some of this may not fall within the scope of the waiver advisory council, provider rates and, that there's all these different components in general, and administrative is one of those components. And
Okay,
usually
so
those,
it is one of those components, it does not fall under this purview of this council.
it may not.
So should I go ahead and make a motion or not?
Well, I'm not sure I was necessarily recommending that providers bill for SDS services out of LTSS. There's already a structure in place for all of that. What I'm recommending, or what I'm doing, is providing a comparative between what providers do with those in the provider model versus what providers do with those in the self-directed model. It is very easy to bill LTSS. It's, the system communicates, we get paid. With SDS, as Laura was mentioning, we have to generate our invoices, and the invoices for one FMCS are different for the invoices to another FMCS, and so we've got to account for that, number one. But then we'll submit the invoice to the person. It can get delayed because of who it's going to, or there might be a request for it to go to the support broker, who then sends it to the person. So there's all sorts of potential for delays in there. Plus, added on top of that, the problems that you have with providers may not fully comprehend or have a solid process in place to build the SDS model or the FMCSs, and so then it might make it through all of those rounds, and then it gets to the FMCS, and then it gets kicked back to the person, then it's got to travel back through to the provider. And I mean, like I mentioned, we've been providing SDS services for quite some time. And it took us a long time to get our processes in place, but every time we submit an invoice, it may or may not get kicked back. It may or may not, require additional work to ensure payment.
And that's ultimately hurting the person.
Yeah, so I'd like to suggest a couple things. Just number one, we have about 17 minutes left, and I know that people that lived experiences would like to go next. So just one thing, just for us aware, for time and respect for that. Great discussion. I don't know if Matt's on the line or not, but maybe that's something that a subgroup could take on to look at recommendations specifically related to payment for financial management, counseling services, and training coordination that could be looked at and put together.
And I actually captured that as an action item. And I'll be having conversations with Mr. Huntsman back here, because what I heard from both of you is that we need to work with our FMCSs to streamline their processes to make this as seamless as they can. And then the one thing that it becomes more difficult to control for would be obviously the employer and making sure that.
So streamline, standardize, and share.
So with that, I just wanted to see if it would be okay with the council members if we moved on to the subwork groups. Charlie and Lucas has shared contact information. I understand he's going to be meeting with Laura. More to come, great information on the slides and training and communication. So if there's no objection, why don't we move to the people with lived experience work group slide so that they can share information. Going to go another slide and another slide. Another one. There you go. Okay, we'll turn it over to Charlotte.
Thank you. So I first would like to just say, welcome to the new members and, let the lived experience members know that our group does meet every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and that they can be included in all of our correspondence within our subcommittee. And to please reach out to me for any more information on that. Okay. Since the announcement of the July 1st waiver changes, the Lived Experience Subcommittee has spoken to many waiver participants regarding the impact changes will have on them. These are some of the stories that we have heard. One participant is a 36-year-old female with a rare genetic condition that uses a wheelchair and ventilator full time. Every breath they take is a struggle, and they live in constant physical pain. Despite this, they have worked incredibly hard to build a meaningful, independent life. They have a full-time career and live alone. They use an OHCQ licensed RSA vendor staffing agency to fill their hard-to-fill shifts. If they lose access to their vendor agency, even temporarily, the consequences for them will be devastating. Their natural supports are already stretched to their breaking point. Other agencies have previously declined to serve them because of their medical complexity. Without their OHCQ licensed vendor, they could lose their career and their home. They could be forced into a hospital, nursing home, or high-level care facility. OHCQ licensed RSA vendors are already legally recognized, regulated, and licensed by the state specifically to provide care to disabled individuals in their home. Requiring these vendors to navigate redundant licensing hurdles places lives in a state of catastrophic risk. Another consideration is a 29-year-old man with a rare neurodegenerative condition who has successfully self-directed his services since 2018 and is currently a college senior with a 4.0 GPA. He has a rare and unique set of physical needs which require his staff to be highly specialized in activities of daily living, deaf-blind communication support, and individualized support to participate in college. Recruiting and retaining staff qualified to meet his specialized needs has become nearly impossible. After DDA policy changes resulted in the denial of his request for an enhanced support level, family as staff became the only way he could continue to remain in school and participate in his community. The proposed limitations on family as staff hours and wages now threaten the stability of his support system. Despite years of effort, no realistic pool of qualified replacements staff exist to fill the hours currently provided by family members. Without the supports currently provided by family members, he may be forced to leave college, jeopardizing years of academic achievement and future career goals, while also losing opportunities for community participation, social connection, and daily safety. Trusted family caregivers play a critical role because they know the person, understand their medical needs, and treat them with respect. Families already carry a heavy emotional and mental load, constantly worried about safety, stability, and the future. Cuts to services and low pay only add more stress to people who are already doing everything they can to protect their loved ones. Strong, consistent support and fair wages are not luxuries. They are the foundation of dignity, safety, and a meaningful life for people with disabilities. As another example of how these proposed cuts will affect participants, look to the case of a 35-year-old with a rare progressive neuromuscular disease. This individual has no functional use of their arms or legs. and relies on a power wheelchair for mobility and a BiPAP for respiratory support at all times. During this past winter, severe weather conditions made travel virtually impossible. Immediately after, the individual's power wheelchair was out of service for several weeks, leaving them unable to leave their home for more than a combined 2 months. Oh, shoot. Wait. Click one. Wait. No. Wait. Yep. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Because of their extensive physical disabilities and dependence on respiratory equipment, they cannot be left alone even for short periods. As a result, their DSPs were unable to leave the home to obtain groceries, pick up prescriptions, or complete other essential errands. They also did not have family members or volunteers willing to be able to step up in these situations. During this period, the individual's day-to-day administrator was the only one suitable to perform these critical tasks, ensuring continued access to food, medications, and other necessities. Without this support, the individual's health and safety would have been placed at serious risk. Reducing either the available hours or the scope of these services will result in catastrophic life-altering consequences. For this individual, day-to-day administrative support services are not a convenience. They are a key support that enables them to manage their household, maintain their health and safety, and continue living independently in the community. Now, the case of a 39-year-old man who relies on dedicated staffing supports to access his community and maintain his independence. Following a recent reduction in his dedicated staffing hours, his ability to participate in community activities was significantly limited. The loss of dedicated hours also increased demands on facility staff and management. As responsibilities shifted, his longtime house manager left the role due to burnout, removing an important source of stability and support from his life. The loss was significant enough that the participant has been periodically forced to leave his home and stay with family members. No. Okay, no. Okay. Staff have reported increasing stress and burnout as they attempt to absorb responsibilities previously covered by dedicated staff. The impact of all these changes is compounded by the proposed reductions to reasonable and customary wages. Staff are expected to remain available beyond scheduled shifts in events of emergencies, weather-related disruptions, transportation delays, or gaps in coverage. At a time when many workers are already facing significant cost of living pressures, reduced compensation makes it more difficult to recruit and retain qualified staff willing to provide this level of flexibility. Numerous participants reported that staff already indicated that they may seek other employment opportunities in response to these new wage reductions. The resulting loss of experienced staff would further increase the risk of service disruptions and threaten participants' ability to continue living independently in their communities. We, as the members of the Lived Experience Subcommittee, are urging DDA to consider the impact that the waiver changes will have on participants and requesting that DDA take immediate action to mitigate some of the damage the waiver changes will cause. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charlotte. Any questions, discussions?
Oh, great. Open app switcher. Single tap.
Do we need to make a motion that DDA consider that feedback? I don't know the process, but
Well, we absolutely heard the feedback, so we will absolutely, we hear everything, so whether it's a formal recommendation or not. But if the council wants to make a formal recommendation, that's, the council can.
So about the subcommittee motion, or recommendation rather, I'm learning the terminology. So, I had, Nova, do you remember I talked to you last week? I would like to be on the subcommittee, one of the subcommittees. So should I reach out to Charlotte directly? How do I do that?
Yes, so any new member who would like to participate in any of the two subgroups, we have one that is people with lived experiences that is facilitated and chaired by Charlotte. There's another one that is a waiver recommendation work group that is facilitated by Charlotte and Josh. Yes, you can absolutely reach out. Nicole has shared information in the welcoming letter with the members or the facilitators of those groups. You can reach out to them directly for that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other items before we go to the waiver recommendation work group? Can you go to their slide, one more slide? We'll turn it over to the waiver recommendation work group to share anything they'd like to share. I believe Charlotte and Josh are helping to facilitate that. When I talked to Charlotte earlier, she wasn't sure who was reporting it. Charlotte?
Yes, yes, well, the waiver, the recommendations, subcommittee has continued to meet, every other week. And we have continued to have, concerns about the process for which, our collaboration has been, moving forward. And, on top of all the very, important, immediate, consequences that we're trying to avoid in the July 1st, this level of collaboration with DDA has been high on our priority list. And, I would like to kind of, bring that discussion here or allow anyone to kind of speak to that or any of our other discussions that we have about the possible service disruptions that will occur on July 1st, based off of the changes as they are proposed.
Charlotte, do you want to repeat that one more time?
Sure. So the subcommittee has continued to have concerns and questions about the collaboration between DDA and our subcommittees and this council as a whole. We have continually felt out of the loop on many proposed amendments and ideals that have been come through, and we have discussed that most in recent meetings, along with the concerns for service disruptions that will follow the July 1st implementation if the proposed amendment goes through as proposed.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we are available to attend meetings and happy to partner and collaborate. I was invited to, I think it was the June 1st one, and we've coordinated on additional meeting. So looking forward to that as we continue to collaborate and move forward with a variety of items within our charter and our scope of this committee. So please make sure if you have specific agenda items that you add it to the contact sheet so that we can look at that. We are open to meeting and partnering during the subcommittee meetings and discussing those things, in addition to any agenda items that are brought here. Any additional thoughts, discussions? Stephanie?
So earlier, I wasn't talking about wages that are changing July 1. I was talking about the discussion of self-directed rates, right, that go into the detailed service authorization that fund people's budgets we're hearing are being decreased. Can you tell us when that's going to happen? Is one question. And then will the provider rates be being decreased as part of that process?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple things. It's really important to note that there's a difference between rates and reasonable and customary standards. So under the self-directed service delivery model, there are standards that are issued related to employee wages, and it will be for the unlicensed vendors for nursing and support broker rates and DDA provider rates. So those are reasonable and customary standards for which a participant, as the employer of record, can choose to negotiate with people they hire, whether it's an employee or contract with a provider. So those are reasonable and customary standards. Those differ from the word rates that we utilize within the LTSS Maryland system. Those rates are utilized for services that are authorized based on those units, and that creates that kind of budget allocation or funding authorization. As per the fiscal year 2027 budget bill, there will be some cuts or differences to rates. It applies to DDA providers. It also applies to coordination of community services. So we have shared some information related to that. So rates will be changing in the future for all DDA providers. In the waiver amendment, we proposed utilizing a new budget methodology, utilizing self-directed service rates that would have applicable cost components based on the BRIC method. And that was noted in Appendix I within our proposal. So with the approval of the amendment by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, then those rates would be utilized based on that approval and effective date of the waiver going forward. As we continue through the amendment process, we will be following our process in terms of sharing information, posting updates, also creating a plain language summary of the comments and the changes. So that's more to come. And as we move forward and work with our partners with the federal government, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and work through that process, we will be communicating information, training, effective dates and such. So just again, there's a difference between the word rates and reasonable and customary standards, which do kind of use that word rate, but it's different in terms of how they're utilized within our service delivery models.
So as it was stated in the RREG, the Rate Review Advisory meeting on the 28th of May, that it's not under the purview for them to decide SDF rates. And it was mentioned that would be a waiver advisory council thing to do, which doesn't seem appropriate. I would like to make a motion that the rates not be implemented until they're reviewed by at least the Waiver Advisory Council. We've not been given any notice of that's something that's even under our radar, but yet it was stated in that meeting that it is. So can we have an opportunity to review them before they go active?
So as Rhonda mentioned, the MGA has directed us to take certain actions. Those actions will be implemented on July 1.
Those are wages though, right? Those are wages. Those are not the rates that I thought we were discussing that are going to be lowered come the amendment approval. That's a different thing.
Right, so the two different delivery models that we have, they both have different cost structures. So the way that the provider rates are built is based on what it costs them to deliver 1 hour of service. And the BLS wage that's used in that model is grossed up by 6 components, 3 of which are unique to that model. The reason why we're changing the SDS budget methodology is because we were directed to do so by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, because they saw that there were components that were part of the current budget methodology that shouldn't have been part of that specific methodology. So that change has to happen in this current waiver amendment. Now, I guess moving forward, we're more than happy to entertain a discussion around the SES budget methodology, et cetera, but this change has to go into effect with this current waiver amendment.
I would like to make a motion that we treat the rates the same as we do with the provider model, and that the same review process goes into place. It doesn't seem appropriate that you guys are deciding what the applicable components are without the same methodology.
I know we had Andy and Laura.
We're both here. So that's very new information that CMS directed that. I had the same thought that Stephanie did, which was the General Assembly didn't direct that the provider rates under self-direction be identical to the provider rates under the provider model. So I've had the same thought, because as we talked about, the administrative costs are different currently. So I guess it would be helpful to understand when you say that CMS directs that, is that verbally and writing?
So in our conversations with CMS, we have technical conversations with them around the, anytime we're doing a waiver amendment, we have conversations with them. So they are specifically flagging how the SDS budgets were being populated using the fully loaded provider rate, when the fully loaded provider rate contains cost components that are not part of the SDS cost structure. Those are program supports, general and administrative, and facility costs.
But that's different from what I'm saying, which is the provider rate for the provider service under self-direction. I'm not talking about budgets in self-direction. I'm talking about the program. Somebody who self-direct says, I want to hire Opportunities Inc. for employment, right? Then what Opportunities Inc. is paid is identical under self-direction as it is under the provider, for someone in the provider model, but the administrative. So all those costs are the same for the two, except the administrative component. And so, to me, that's what I'm talking about, that I think there is an issue there, and that there should be discussion, whether it's, I also agree with Stephanie that I don't see how the Waiver Advisory Council can take up rates personally. But somewhere there needs to be an assessment. And maybe there's a motion to be made between what Stephanie's saying and I'm saying, and Anne has her hand up, maybe collectively.
Well, I just, first off, I understood early on that CMS was concerned that there wasn't a methodology for determining reasonable customary rates. And that was a directive to DDA, or the state, that you need a methodology. So I understood that for the reasonable customary rates. I've never heard before now that CMS also directed rates, that there was insufficient rate methodology for how the budgets are constructed. And I also agree fully that needs to be a carefully designed, deep analysis on what the costs truly are, for self-directed services versus provider services because of the differences in requirements to make sure that they're sufficient for both. And we've gone through that for the provider rates, the BRIC, right? And SDS used to be based on the BRIC, and I guess we're moving away from that. So, I mean, I made that assumption, but I agree that it needs to have a careful analysis. It can't just be hilltop going, I think this is right, and I think this is right, or whoever came up with what appeared in the waiver amendment 4. I personally missed that change.
I think we've been having those conversations since April or May, when we started to talk about the FY 2027 budget, as well as upcoming changes to the waiver and those what during those workshops. So, you know, this is not something new that just came out.
I missed it, Laura missed it, I think other people online missed it, so, that's all I have to say. I don't know if Stephanie made a motion or where we stand with that, but, I would make a motion after Stephanie, well, I think it's like, but, that we are able to see the feedback and be a response to the feedback, so we know how we're going to behave and respond before July 1. So as soon as possible, I was hoping we would have gotten that today, so we could digest it, to see what you are accepting and the feedback, what you're not accepting and why, and kind of where we stand with this budget. So I would make a request from Waiver Advisory Complaint Motion, and we get the feedback within the week. Yeah, we should be to figure out what we're going there.
Well, and also very specifically, the first part of what you said, of trying to have a better understanding, but Robert, I feel like what you're saying, there's a couple things being conflated that I think we're talking about something very specific, as opposed to how all of budgets are, you know, rates and budgets for self-direction, as opposed to, I'm talking very narrowly about providers, because all these vendors who become providers are also going to be affected by this, in addition to existing providers are going to be affected by it.
So the budget methodology that is in the waiver amendment that we talked about in the webinars, and you can look at the proposals that are online, talks about utilizing cost components that are subject to SDS, which is noted in Appendix I. So if you're a DDA provider, remember as a participant self-directing, I can hire an employee, the unlicensed vendor, a DDA provider. The DDA provider rates will be the same. They'll be the DDA provider rates. Reasonable and customary standards show that you can pay up to the DDA provider rate.
That's what we're saying, that we have a concern about.
Okay, I'm just trying to ground in terms of that. From that, there's reasonable and customary standards, and then there's rates. And so, based on concerns and that we had heard from CMS, that was part of the proposal, which is again available online. Happy to further discuss with whoever. We are finalizing our review of information within the department. We hope to have that out soon. So as soon as we get word from that, we'll be sharing and communicating.
That's a very comprehensive review, not only by our own deputy secretary, who reviewed all, I think, 863 or however many comments we got, but the office of the secretary is also reviewing every comment as well.
Can I just say one last thing? I just think that everybody has an investment in people who self-direct being able to access what they need if they choose to have that from someone else who chose they don't choose to be the employer of record for something very specific to hire people, but it was the vendors or a provider, or vendors who then become providers, all have an investment in making sure that people can access what they need. And since the one role of this group, I think, is to provide feedback around the waiver amendments. I know we all had an opportunity to provide writing, but given that this is more intensive discussion, given all of the discussion today, I just think I would hope that the department would take into account this discussion as part of your official process for input around waiver amendments and things like that.
I agree with Laura, and I think more discussion input is necessary, especially when discussing the rates of the brick for self-direction. There's so much comment being made that there's not the programming and admin costs, and I would have to completely disagree with that. There's still, it might look different, but there's still plenty of programming and admin costs within self-direction.
Well, I'm talking about the provider rate, and I would argue that there is not enough administrative in the provider rate under self-direction currently for what providers have to do to be able to be paid under self-direction. Very different. It's based on LTSS, which is more streamlined than what providers have to do to work in self to support somebody in self-direction.
And we also have on the provider side, right, completion of the cost report vis-a-vis the general ledger data collection pool. I know that we are currently analyzing that data as well, whether or not it's capturing some of what you're talking about, Laura, remains to be seen. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Some of us have other engagements that we need to get to. Our deepest apologies for not getting to the public comments, but we will certainly take a look at the questions and comments that were left using this platform. So with that.
So yeah, again, thank you so much. Just something really important to note as we're closing. Our great support from Nicole. Nicole is moving on to a new opportunity, so we're wishing her well. So as that going forward, Don Rudolph, who is my deputy, will be supporting as we identify some additional staff resources. So communication will be coming out from either myself or Don or someone else, so just be on the lookout for that. Our next meeting is going to be in August, and the communication that goes out, reminder, there will be that link if you want to add agenda-specific items. I look forward to meeting with the waiver recommendation work group in the upcoming meeting. The communication we talked about went out about 2:10. The website is live, so please take a look at that. Really appreciate all the thoughts and discussions today, and we wish you all well. Look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.